Hey guys, my name is Dice Rollin'. Are you ready to start a weird-ass, mind-bending, completely what-the-fuck journey through a movie about an above-height average man and his shiny balls? No? Well, too bad, you already clicked on the video. We're gonna be taking a look at this cherished yet often overlooked first installment of the franchise in celebration of its 40th anniversary, and try to make some sense of it. So without further ado, this is Phantasm. The movie opens with sex in a graveyard. It's a little darker than sex on the beach, and far more deadly. And this is what they mean when they say you should always have safe sex. We're then introduced to friends of Tommy's, Jody, played by Bill Thornbury, and Reggie, played by Reggie Bannister, during Tommy's funeral. As good an occasion as any to meet new people. They think Tommy committed suicide by stabbing himself repeatedly. We're also introduced to Jody's little brother Mike, played by A. Michael Baldwin, who likes to ride tremendously loud dirt bikes through cemeteries. Excuse me, looking for a dead body. Dead body. Anybody seen a dead body? Mike's bike stalls and he notices that the place is infested with Jawas. Meanwhile, Jody visits their parents in the mausoleum and notices the same thing. Right before...
The funeral is about to begin, sir.
Anyway, Mike's sneaking around in the bushes watching the funeral even though Jody didn't want him to attend because he'd get nightmares. But it's a good thing he did, because after everyone leaves, he sees the tall man, played by Angus Scrimm, load Tommy back into the hearse by himself. This calls for a trip to the stereotypical mystic wise woman's house. Go away! I already bought 5 boxes of your do-si-dos already! Oh, it's you. In all fairness, you do look like a Girl Scout.
Grandmother, Michael has returned and wishes to speak with you.
If she's a psychic, she should have already known that. Mike tells them not about the freaky funeral director, but instead about Jody leaving soon. As shown in this flashback where Jody talks with another friend, Toby. Tommy, Reggie, Jody, Toby. No wonder Mike feels left out, his name doesn't rhyme. On a side note, it's probably not a great idea to talk about how you're gonna drop the kid's ass at his aunt's place and leave when he's mere feet away. Psychic Lady's granddaughter tells Mike not to worry because grandmother says if Jody leaves, he'll be taking Mike with him. Then he mentions the tall man and his impressive gains. In response to this, a magic demon box appears on the table before Mike because grandmother wants to play a game. Mike is told to put his hand in the box.
What's in it?
Rabbit gerbil. You've heard of a Chinese finger trap, now get ready for hand grabber. Apparently, grandmother's little game was meant to demonstrate that as long as you don't fear something, you'll be alright. And that it's all in Mike's mind.
Come and visit us again soon.
Spoiler, he never does. Later on, the granddaughter, for whatever reason, makes a trip to Morningside Cemetery and finds a mysterious door with something horrifying hidden inside. At about the same time, Reggie, who as it turns out is the ice cream man, joins Jody in a bit of a musical interlude. They play the song Sitting Here at Midnight, which is actually sung by Bill Thornbury himself. That night, Jody heads to the local bar and proceeds to pick up the woman who killed Tommy, who proceeds to lead him to Morningside Cemetery for some sexy time.
Danger, Will Robinson! Danger!
But just like any other horror movie, the smaller head is doing the thinking here. Unbeknownst to Jody, though, Mike is following him.
What's the only thing to do in this town?
Bone in the cemetery, apparently. Yes! The pun was 100% intended. So both Jody and Mike get an eyeful, even though I have no idea how Mike is able to see anything besides his brother's ass from that far away. And speaking of Jody's ass, however, Mike's got bigger problems than being scarred for life. Or rather, smaller problems. Jody goes after Mike to find out what his deal is, and Mike informs him that there's something in the darkness. Naturally, Jody doesn't believe him and sends him home before returning to his booty call. Unfortunately for him, she has mysteriously disappeared. Then we're given what I have to say is one of the most eerie moments in the movie. The next day, Mike wanders around town while Jody goes back to the bar to inquire about the lady in lavender. Mike spots the ominous figure that is the tall man while there. Back at home, Mike's working on the Cuda when some of the angry dwarves drop the car on him. Alright, the movie doesn't end there. And instead, Mike crushes Jody's foot before explaining to him once again that there's something after him. Unsurprisingly, Jody doesn't believe this a second time, and Mike decides he's done messing around. He arms himself and goes to Morningside Cemetery to investigate these strange happenings. In such a situation, absolute stealth and caution is key. Good news! You made it into the basement of the funeral home. Bad news! The caretaker heard you coming. Mike hides in a coffin to avoid being found, and with some sheer luck, it works. Taking a look around the mausoleum, Mike comes across the mysterious door. And a flying ball of death! Due to poor reflexes, the caretaker is the one to get it in the face. That doesn't mean Mike's out of the woods yet, as the tall man chases him through the funeral home. And now you know where mustard comes from. Mike takes one of the wiggling fingers, that sounds like a euphemism for something, and barely escapes from yet another feisty Jawa. That morning, Mike shows Jody his souvenir, and with some undeniably weird proof, Jody finally believes what Mike has been trying to tell him this whole time. Jody makes the smart decision to take this to the sheriff, but there's one problem. It's the Jim Henson fly from hell! After Jody and Mike use the handy garbage disposal to get rid of it, Reggie pops in for a visit. He quickly finds out there's some fucked shit going on when the demon fly comes back, but it's quickly dispatched. Without any proof of the odd things going on up at Morningside, Jody decides to head up there himself, armed with a gun. Honestly, I think it would have been quite hilarious if they had replaced the broken window, and here comes Jody to kick it in. But that's alright, because it makes it easier for Jody to slip into the funeral home and be attacked by one of the dwarves.
We represent
Death.
I'm not sure if that was skill or sheer dumb luck.
I'm just gonna go up there and take a look around. Nobody's gonna see me.
But Jody isn't out of danger yet, as a hearse chases him down with a driver that seems to be impervious to bullets. Not only that, but the CUDA shows up mysteriously.
Door latch. Get in.
Listen, Mike, I would be a lot more cautious about pulling shit like that, given how Jody handles a firearm. We're then given a car chase, with Jody firing at the hearse, which works, causing it to crash into a tree. Taking a look inside, they discover what had been driving it the whole time.
Tommy.
Yes, Tommy, who was killed by the lady in lavender after having sex with her, somehow got dwarficized and filled with mustard and murderous rage. So, Jody calls Reggie so they can put Tommy in his ice cream truck as evidence? I'm not really clear on what they were planning on doing with him. Regardless, the three of them return to the house and were given a scene which I have no explanation for.
Hey, you boys back yet?
That's Myrtle. Who is she? Why is she in the house? Where did she come from? Why haven't we seen her before now? Who knows? We'll never get answers to any of that. But speaking of answers, Reggie, Jody, and Mike discuss what the deal is with turning corpses into dwarves. Reggie comes up with a solution of sorts.
We'll lay that sucker out flat and drive a stake right through his goddamn heart.
I hate to break this to you, Reggie, but the tall man isn't a vampire. I appreciate your enthusiasm, though. Jody has Reggie take Mike to the antique store owned by Sally so that he'll be safe. While there, Mike actually finds a clue that reveals the tall man has been around for a long time. He demands that the ladies take him back this instant. Meanwhile, Reggie seems to encounter a problem within the freezer of his truck, and Jody encounters the tall man in a brief nightmare. On the way back, Mike and the ladies find Reggie's overturned truck, with neither Reggie nor the formerly deceased Tommy to be found. But there are some other dwarves in the area, and they seem to be pissed off. Mike gets thrown through the back window of the car as it speeds off into the darkness. After regaining consciousness, he makes his way back home to Jody and explains what happened. Jody locks Mike with extreme resistance in his room to protect him as he heads to Morningside. But Mike has been watching MacGyver and constructs a tool to escape. Remember when I said I'd be trying to make sense of this movie? Well, this doesn't make any. But let's not dwell on that, as Mike breaks out of his room, grabs a gun, and takes off to catch up with Jody.
I've been waiting for you.
Or not! On the bright side, Mike gets a lift to his original destination either way. However, before the tall man can get him there, Mike shoots out a window and a tire, launching himself out of a second vehicle that night. And in true Michael Bay fashion, the hearse hits a pole and explodes. We're running out of hearses here! Meanwhile, Jody visits their parents again, this time in a more close and personal fashion. And as Mike finds out, just a moment later, the casket is empty. We get one more shiny death orb before Jody shoots it, and Mike leads him to the mysterious door from before. And surprise! Reggie's not dead. And as he explains, neither are the ladies from earlier. Now reunited, the three of them find barrels upon barrels in an overly lit room, as well as 2 metal poles. Inside the barrels are the soon-to-be killer dwarves. Mike also finds out that those metal poles are actually a gateway to another planet where the fresh dwarves are used as slaves. Why? Apparently because of the planet's gravity and heat. Congratulations! You solved the mystery! Now here's your prize. When the lights come back on, Reggie finds himself alone in the room with the pre-dwarves. Jody searches outside for Mike while the lady in lavender lurks around waiting to kill him. Reggie realizes that the portal is like a tuning fork and attempts to stop it. Instead, it starts sucking everything in the room through to the red planet. Reggie's able to crawl his way out of the room, but it seems that the damage has already been done. That, or we're going to see the Wicked Witch go flying by any second now. Reggie finds the lady in lavender and she wastes no time in stabbing him. As he lay dying, he learns who she really is. And here you thought the concept of her fucking guys in the cemetery couldn't get any creepier. Seeing this, Jody and Mike haul ass out of there and come up with a plan to trick the tall man. So Mike goes inside the house to find anything they can use against him while Jody goes off to set everything up. Just one problem with that. Mike runs for his life to the location he and Jody discussed, all while encountering some of the tall man's traps, which are only nightmares? I guess the key here is not to be afraid, just like the psychic and her granddaughter told him. It's good to know that if Tommy and Reggie didn't want to be stabbed, they shouldn't have been afraid of the knife. Anyway, Mike leads the tall man right into the trap Jody set up, and Jody sends down gigantic boulders to trap him in the mine shaft. The end. Except for the fact that Mike wakes up and this was all a fever-induced nightmare. That's right, everything that happened was a nightmare. Not only that, but Reggie's still alive, Mike's parents are still dead, and Jody had actually died in a car crash. Mike tells Reggie all about this and that he's convinced that the tall man killed his parents and Jody. Reggie doesn't really believe him and tells him that it was just a nightmare. But you know what the best therapy for that kind of trauma is? A road trip! So Reggie sends Mike upstairs to pack. But there's just one problem. And with that, the movie ends, leaving the audience with more questions than answers. But maybe that was the point. It is possible that it was meant to leave the viewers questioning what was real and what wasn't. Why this or that was a thing. Or maybe it was just because it was a hell of a long movie that had to be chopped up to be acceptable. It wasn't a hit when it first came out, mainly due to it premiering during the era of slasher movies. But it gained a cult following in the following years for a reason. It has iconic imagery that you can point out pretty quickly if you've seen the movie. Need I mention the balls? The atmosphere combined with the soundtrack create kind of an eerie vibe. Scary? No, not really. Creepy, maybe. The acting is meh, but certainly not horrendous. Angus Scrimm pulled off the ominous demeanor of an otherworldly being quite well. However, I do have to say that I found Sally and Susie over there to be a touch annoying. The plot starts off as very much horror and even a little mystery, but takes a bit of a sharp turn into sci-fi there at the end. Not saying that's a bad thing, but it does cause a bit of whiplash. There's also a lot of loose ends here. But again, I think that comes from a mix of wanting the audience to be confused to a degree, to feel like they've gone through a surreal nightmare that even they're not sure they made it out of. And because a large chunk was edited out of the original footage for the film. Given that Don Coscarelli wrote, edited, and directed this, a very low-budget movie, I think he did a pretty good job. It's rough and doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, but that doesn't make it a bad movie. As a matter of fact, I think it's a fun horror movie. It's not for everyone, and I get that. To some, it's a little too slow in its pacing. Others don't find it scary. And there are people who don't think the tall man is tall enough. I'm looking at you, Laura. It's got a cool atmosphere, soundtrack, and even humor, whether it was intentional or not. If you can suspend some disbelief and just go along for the ride, you'll enjoy it. Just try not to analyze it too much. So with that being said, I give Phantasm 6 out of 10 bloody thumbs up. It's part of my collection and I've watched it a handful of times and still enjoy it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a like to let me know. And don't forget to leave a comment down below telling me what you think of Phantasm, and what other movies you'd like to see me review in the future. Also, don't forget to share this video to help the channel grow, and subscribe for more videos like this. See you later.